right, everybody, welcome back to the smoke-filled room. I'm outside. I got my boy with me, Dustin. Say hello to everybody. He's got his puffin toy. It's a little warm outside, so I don't know how long he's going to last, but I figured Dustin had to make a cameo. He's our mascot at the company. All right, you can go get comfortable. Good boy. All right, we are back at the smoke-filled room. As you'll notice, we've got 4 of our 5 political team members here with us today. We have Michael and Abby and Matt and John. We don't have Chris with us. He's so excited about the premiere of the Barbie movie that he took the entire week off so he could plan his outfit, plan what theater he's going to go to. I'm pretty excited for him. He's going to be out there at the premiere tonight watching the Barbie movie. So, Chris, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's a great movie for you. I know you've been looking forward to this for months. So, hope you have a good night. Abby and I, my wife, not Abby Oliver. Hi, Abby. My wife, Abby, and I will be at the Oppenheimer premiere. So, maybe we'll cross paths with Chris and we'll see what he's dressed up as. Maybe I'll get a photo. Any comments on Chris and his love of Barbie from anybody before we get going?
I saw Sound of Freedom yesterday, and it's really good. Watch it if you can.
That's not about Chris or about Barbie or about Oppenheimer, Michael.
It's a movie though, and it's in theaters.
I'm just proud that you knew of a movie, so that's an improvement in your pop culture knowledge. So I'll take it.
I personally will be doing the Barbieheimer, idea tomorrow. We're gonna go see Barbie, then Oppenheimer.
I feel like Chris will do a double feature with you. He'll watch Barbie twice in 2 nights, so maybe he'll go with you tomorrow.
It'll be the highlight of his week, really.
I can imagine how angry Chris is and how much he wants to jump in right now as he's listening to this. All right, let's get into the real stuff. Let's get serious. We've got a ton to talk about. We intended to have some time maybe to joke about Chris and talk about Chicago and just to make him angry. But I'm looking at this agenda and there's no way we get through even half of this. There is so much going on in politics, but let's do our best to get through it. I want to start with the first topic here and just get everybody's initial thoughts on the biggest news of the week, both in politics and frankly, just in policy and news in general, is the Illinois Supreme Court ruled that the Safety Act is constitutional. It will go into effect on September 18th, so less than 2 months from now when we're recording this. Cash bail will no longer be a thing. We will be the first state in the entire country to not have cash bail. This is a massive social experiment that we're going to find out whether it works or it doesn't work. I've got some specific questions and comments about this, but first, let's just open up the floor. Seems like Michael's excited to jump in. So, Michael, why don't you kick us off, and then other people can jump in with their thoughts.
I mean, obviously, it's not really surprising based on the makeup of the court. It would have been nice to have a couple of more Republicans on there, but obviously, this last election cycle that didn't happen. But yeah, I think it's a sad day for the state. And I know a lot of people are nervous about what this is going to mean for, state's attorneys' offices and our sheriff's departments and the people that are, working around the clock to keep our community safe.
I've heard, Butler, to that point, I've heard from attorneys that have argued in front of the Illinois Supreme Court that Justice O'Brien, who was just newly elected, has been very political in a lot of her decisions, and I think a lot of other justices have as well. So I'm not surprised that this ruling came down the way it did. I know Justice Overstreet was originally going to write this opinion, and people saw it, and they had a Democrat-leaning justice write that opinion. So it's unfortunate to see that the Supreme Court, which is not supposed to be political, is unfortunately become one of the most political things in our state. So not surprising, but unfortunate. So we'll see how it goes. But
one of the ironic things too, as you're saying, Abby, is that when people get to the ballot box, they don't even pay attention to who the judges are. They're often overlooked. They don't care about the judicial races. People who are giving money would rather give it to legislature or executive office candidates. But then we complain when it goes wrong in the judiciary, but we got to pay more attention to these candidates.
And that's a great
absolutely
point. Elections have consequences. And in 2022, we had an opportunity to take a 4-3 majority on the court. But instead, we lost both of the, Supreme Court races in the suburbs. And now the Democrats have a 5-2 majority. These down ballot races have really big consequences on our everyday lives, and people need to start paying more attention to them. If we would have won those races in, last November, this ruling never could have happened. Safety Act probably ruled unconstitutional, and, this law isn't going into effect. So it just kind of goes to a larger point that elections have consequences, and as politicos and operatives, we need to find ways to make people care more about these down ballot races, because that's where a lot of the impact on our day-to-day lives is.
Well, we had a great opportunity. It was the one chance we had in Illinois to finally get a voice in this state when credit where credit is due. A group of politicos got behind a effort to not retain a Democratic justice, and that was Kilbride in 2020. They succeeded, and we give them credit, even though I'm about to say less nice things about them in a second. But they did. They won that, and they created an opening. Democrats don't waste an opportunity, though, and they jumped in immediately and redrew the maps to make it where it was going to be much, much harder for Republicans to win the 2 seats that they would need to retain the majority. Still, we had a great chance. Unfortunately, that same group who had won the one race got involved and ran the 2 Supreme Court races and lost them. They lost an appellate court race. By the way, if you want to know how Illinois Republican politics works, that same group is now running 2 more appellate court races in 2024. So losing as a Republican in Illinois still gets you plenty of business, apparently. But we had a great opportunity, and we squandered it in 2 ways. One, in one of the districts, we squandered it in the primary. There were multiple candidates in the primary, several of which who everyone knew had a great chance of winning, one of which who everyone knew would have no chance of winning. And unfortunately, the party didn't do a good enough job either recruiting a candidate who could get through that primary and beat the guy who made it, who ultimately was nominated, a guy by the name of Mark Curran, who some know. He's at one point kind of went a little bit off the deep end recently, but when he was a little bit more Mark at one point was fairly balanced. He was a former Democrat, a great sheriff in Lake County, kind of lost it a bit towards the end, but he was a client at a certain point. So I'll give that, honest point out so people know. But it took things a bit far over the last couple of years. He seems to have lost sort of what made him a great elected official and a great candidate. And we knew he had no chance of winning that general election, but the people running the campaign for the other candidates just couldn't beat him in the primary. And then, of course, he lost in the general because we knew he would. And then the other district down in Oliver's area, we had a great candidate in Justice Burke, and just ran a poor campaign and lost a seat we never should have lost. So at worst right now, we should be down 3-4, not 2-5. But we squandered an opportunity in a primary, we squandered an opportunity in a general, and here we are in a 5-2 minority on the courts. And so who would have expected that this was going to go any other way? Anybody who thought that they weren't going to say that the Safety Act was constitutional was just deluding themselves.
Right. And to Jonathan's point earlier that we didn't seize that opportunity, the Dems fully realized the opportunity they had to have that influence on the court. You saw, especially in Justice Burke's race, his opponent was very political and spent millions and millions of dollars to get her Justice O'Brien now elected to the Supreme Court. And whereas Justice Burke wanted to run a very standard campaign, he wanted to be a judge, and we did not put the resources into that race that we needed to. So I think a lot of times we see the Dems not only seeing the opportunity, but effectively seizing it in their campaigning. So.
Well, we talked a lot about that race, us as a team. We weren't doing these recorded SFRs back then, so we can give a quick preview of what we talked about, which was what you said. The Democrats went very political in their campaign, and we've run, CORE, our company that we all work for, has run a lot of judicial campaigns. So we understand that there are certain rules you have to follow as a candidate for judge, especially as a sitting judge, that you don't have to follow in a typical campaign. So we get that. We understand that. The problem is that most judicial candidates, especially right of center judicial candidates, use that as an excuse to just not campaign. And it seemed like a bit of the problem there for the Burke campaign of just not pushing back, not fighting back, and not engaging on a lot of things that the voters care about, just running that standard judicial campaign of integrity and judge, and look at me, I'm smiling and I've got a robe on and I'm carrying a gavel, and that's great, but that's not what people vote for nowadays. It's a marketing campaign. You got to speak to what people care about. Democrats are great at that, and on the Republican side, we don't do an awesome job at that, especially in judicial campaigns. And there are ways to do it to stay aligned with judicial canon, to stay out of trouble with the AARDC if you're an attorney, or with the Judicial Inquiry Board if you're an actual judge. There's ways to do it to stay above board, but lawyers are always going to stay as far away from the line as possible. And that's the problem, as in politics. If one side stays way far away from the line and the other side goes right up to the line, you're putting yourself at a massive disadvantage. And that's a bit of what happened to Burke, because everyone knows he was the best candidate in that race, but he didn't win.
Yeah, and I think as Republicans, we have that problem, especially like not just in these races, but especially in these races that where we don't have the courage to maybe go right up to that line and we suffer the consequences. And to your point also, I think Democrats know that they can push the boundaries and we're not going to fight back and they're going to get away with it. So why would they not keep doing it if they know it's successful and no one's gonna check what they're doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and listen, we're not advocating for anyone to do underhanded politics. I mean, I got my
Okay.
start in Cook
Yeah.
County politics. You want to do negative campaigning, give me a call. I love it. I'm great at it. But we're not saying that that had to be done here. Like I said, we've done a lot of judicial campaigns, and not a single one of our clients has ever lost. I mean, it's politics. Complaints are always filed, but we've won every single one. We've always been above board. There's never been a controversy. So there's a way to do it, to use marketing, but still stay above board. But most of these judicial candidates are so afraid to even do any marketing. And you're a mile away from the line at that point. You're not even getting anywhere near it. And that puts you at a disadvantage.
Agreed.
What else
Well, yeah,
in the
and I think-
Safety Act? Go ahead, John.
I was just saying, like, one more point of kind of like the politics of it, and 2022 kind of showed us the importance of focusing on these judicial races. I mean, Lisa Holder White has to run for a full 10-year term in 2024, and that 4th district isn't as ruby red as everyone wants to make it out to be. I mean, only 32% of that district's Republican, 40% is labeled nonpartisan, and there's a lot of red downstate or a lot of blue downstate cities there. So, hopefully we learn from our mistakes in 2022 and we understand the importance of running really good judicial races, because, we need to defend the seat that's going to be up this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, going from 5-2 to 6-1. I mean, Overstreet's a rock star, but if he's the only representative we have in the Supreme Court, it doesn't do as much good. Speaking of which, on the Safety Act, let's talk about the Safety Act itself and the politics of it. There's a lot written about the policy, and Core Strategies is not a policy organization. Smoke-filled room, Long Nine Studio, we're not policy organizations, policy shops, we're political. So we're not going to get into the policy of the Safety Act. A ton has been written on both sides of it, and that's really not our concern. We're talking about the politics of it. And one of the things that Republicans did poorly and conservatives did poorly in 2022 was making a lot of these discussions, a lot of these races about the Safety Act itself instead of what it meant. One of the first things that they teach you in marketing is stop talking about the features of your product and talk about the benefits to the consumer or the potential buyer. In this case, stop talking about issues and talk about the outcome. We get so lost on the Safety Act itself that you give the other side an opportunity to respond. If you say the Safety Act will do X, well, now the other side can quibble in the details of what the Safety Act does and doesn't do. And I'll be the first to admit that the first version of the Safety Act was awful, but thanks to Berlin and a few others, the changes that were made in December of 22, I think it was 22, to the Safety Act, improved it. What was in 22? That was 21, right? I'm getting my years mixed up. But either way, the changes that were made
22.
did improve some of the problems and help fix some of the problems. And so you get quibble in those details and you're not going to win. But if you focus on safety, that's the outcome here, because ultimately that's what matters. If you say that Democrats passed the Safety Act and that's going to cause all these problems, they could fight you back. But if you say Democrats stand for putting criminals back on the streets, Democrats stand for defending criminals instead of standing for victims, like there are ways that you can use the issue itself to put yourself in a much better position. And now you can use people like Kim Foxx and Eric Reinhart and a few others as your example of how these Democrats are basically supporting pro-crime policies instead of justice policies, because voters want criminal justice, and a lot of Republicans, myself included, want criminal justice reform. So to get stuck on was this a good reform or a bad reform is a losing proposition. But to focus on the outcome, the issue itself, the result itself of do you feel safe or do you not feel safe, that's where you can actually win. And you see a lot of the responses from Republicans throughout the state on the Safety Act, and some did this well. A lot got lost in the weeds on the constitutionality of this and the language of the Safety Act, and that was a loser. I want to give a shout out to State Representative Tom Weber because I saw his response and I thought it was the best of the bunch. I mean, pivoting directly to, Lane, bring it up on screen and post, bringing this directly to safety and the policies that affect safety was the right play. So shout out to Tom Weber and whoever is in his comm shop who did that. It was a great response. More Republicans should have been on that track instead of focusing on the Safety Act itself.
So what's going to be particularly fascinating is that Republicans are going to have another bite at the apple, if you will, to message us properly. State's attorneys are on the ballot running for re-election all across Illinois. So it'll be fascinating to see if we've learned from our mistakes and we're able to pivot our messaging in a way that's effective for voters.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you're seeing that the left and their supportive and friendly bloggers, if I could say, have been trying to say that crime is not a good issue for Republicans for a long time. But the polling doesn't back that up. And ultimately, we used CORE put out a study, and we admitted that crime was used poorly as an issue by Republicans. It isn't the issue. It's something that proves a larger theme, which is that the Democrats are extreme in this state. But that's the proof. I mean, why aren't we out there talking about the fact that we are now the one state in the entire country, not deep blue California, not New York, not some of these incredibly progressive states, but working class, moderate Illinois is the first state to pass something that completely eliminates cash bail, instead of maybe a more reasonable alternative, which would have been giving judges the option to go with cash or go with other options when it comes to setting bail. Instead of just outlawing it entirely, you could have found a more middle of the road solution that could have been more fair for those who don't have means, who can't buy their way out of jail. There was a middle ground here, but Democrats went way to the progressive left, and that is not the voters of this state. They are not way to the progressive left. And so there's an opportunity here if conservatives and Republicans take advantage.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at how that developed over the course of the last like 2 years or so, where you had, 100 out of 102 states attorneys speak out against it. Of the majority of those signed on to this lawsuit challenging it. You had, tens of thousands of witness slips filed, and it's just in one ear, out the other. And it's just another reminder that these Democrats, state reps and state senators really have no respect for states attorneys, sheriffs, or their constituents. They just disregard, any outreach. I mean, 100 out of 102. How can 100 out of 102 states attorneys say something is a bad idea, and then these elected officials in Springfield say, well, we don't really care, we're going to pass it anyway, and you guys can deal with it? That's just absurd.
Yeah, and I think, again, we've talked about this a lot, that we've got to get better at messaging as a party. And if we get lost on the Safety Act, even if we get lost on safety, we're losing. It's got to be a proof of a larger thing. And the larger thing is that the Democratic Party in this state is more extreme and more progressive than even the Democratic voters, let alone independent voters and swing voters in the state are. That's got to be our larger message. And this is just one proof of that larger message that we've got to hammer home over and over and over. There are other issues that we can use to prove that point. And we've got something on the agenda later on we're going to talk about that also proves that point. But that's got to be something that we talk about over and over. We're so focused on issues. Most of our party is full of policy wonks. And so we just want to talk about issues. And that's great, but issues don't move votes. Nobody cares about issues, especially not voters. And so you've got to use that as a proof of a larger thing. And we're just not very good at that as a party.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on this, John? Why don't you close us off on this topic?
Yeah, I was going to say, to your point, it's just really important to keep it simple. I mean, most voters aren't as politically active and aware as our listeners are and as we are. They have everyday lives and they're more focused on bigger things to them. Keep the message as simple as possible and as easy to understand. Don't get lost in the nuance of how the Safety Act works, but it's much easier to go with the simple message of Democrats are extreme in letting criminals back on the street. That's going to resonate a hell of a lot more than just getting into the nuances of how a policy works and the implications of it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep moving because we got so much to cover. Those who don't follow politics don't understand that this week is kind of like Christmas for political nerds, because once every 3 months, we get the fundraising reports, both federal and state, that we get to pour through to see where candidates are spending their money, where candidates are raising their money, who is raising, who is not. And that was this week. So our team has spent hours and hours pouring through these reports. Other people have as well, and we thank them for their reporting on this as well. And I'll reference a few things that others have reported in a second. But we've got some reports on what we have seen in fundraising for the last quarter. So I want to do something, just because I know each of you have seen things in these reports that stood out to you. So I want to go and just give you each one at a time some of the things that stood out to you as an overview on the topic. And then there's a few other topics that I want to bring up that we can cover as a group. So Matt, why don't we start with you on some things that you saw looking at the D2s that stood out to you and the FEC reports.
One thing that was really interesting is you can tell which candidates are going to have a harder time just now. You need to start momentum early, and candidates that should be having better numbers, but don't, we could almost predict if they don't turn the ship around pretty quickly, they might have a tough primary challenge. For instance, Danny Davis in the 7th congressional district, he should be bringing in a lot more money than he already is, and his primary opponent is already lapping him, which is just going to be, that is a prophecy foretold of the next few months in this primary.
All right. Abby. I just combined Abby and Oliver. So Abby, what are you saying?
So I think overall, I think you see, like we talked about before with the Safety Act and the Supreme Court races, I think Democrats are much more aware and prepared for what's coming up in 2024. You see with the organizations, especially in DuPage, but really all over, where Democratic organizations and campaigns are already starting to host fundraisers. They're already starting to hire staff and consultants. And so, like, for example, like we might talk about this a little bit more with our congressional candidates, but like Sean Casten has raised over almost $1 million this quarter. And so and Bill Foster, similar to him. So, these are very winnable seats for us. And we don't even really have serious, candidates raising tons of money there. So I think
just to clarify, I don't mean to correct you, but I just want to make sure we're always given accurate info. So they had great fundraising quarters, but it wasn't, Casten raised $390K, Foster raised $298K. Foster has 1.1 million on hand. So I think you meant cash on hand more than anything.
Yes, correct.
And yes, they're raising a ton, and your point is valid. I just want to be sure that we're being accurate. So just want to point that out, but keep going with your point.
I'm marrying an Irishman, so I get to exaggerate my stories a little bit sometimes. So
I'm clearly quite Irish myself. Like, I made the mistake of wearing a short sleeve shirt, so everyone can see how white I am. So yeah, trust me, I get it.
God, close your eyes, everyone. So I just think the overall point is that Democrats are prepared, and they're already running for 2024, and we're still trying to find candidates for a lot of these races. So I just think it's a problem last cycle. It's going to be a problem this cycle, and until Republicans start to plan, outside of election season, it's going to continue to be a challenge for us to get ahead. So
the only good news I'd say is, I mean, you cover DuPage County for us as well as a couple other counties. And what we've seen in DuPage County is that the Democrats in that county aren't great at fundraising either. I mean, there are opportunities for us if we can find good candidates and if they can raise the funds to compete. Everyone talks about how Republicans are so behind. And sure, in some of these big congressionals, yeah, we're way behind on cash. And of course, Papa Pritzker is always there with his checkbook. So I understand all that. But as fundraisers, a lot of these individual Democrats, especially at the state level, are not very good at fundraising. And they overly rely on Pritzker to come in with the big checkbook. So there are opportunities for us, but we need our individual candidates to get out there and start hustling and raising money.
Yeah, maybe it's just the fact that I've experienced behind the scenes with some of the infighting, and you're just, even though this task is simple, it's, just getting our party to that point in the area is going to take a lot of work. So
yeah, for sure. Michael, what are you seeing?
On Congressional down by me, it's pretty interesting. Mary Miller, she raised 161,000. She's always kind of been a small, she doesn't always put up great numbers on fundraising. This was a little bit of a better quarter from her than what she's done in the past, so she deserves some credit for that. Congressman Bost raised 453,000, which is a record for the 12th congressional, back-to-back records, and he's got about $1 million cash on hand, so that's really a good spot to be in. Darren LaHood, and I'm sure Jonathan will touch on this as well, is raising a lot, 542,000, and obviously Nikki Budzinski is taking a potential challenge seriously. She raised 459,000 this last quarter, so she's been putting up strong numbers as well and is kind of putting herself in a strong position. One of the things that I was really happy to see, State Senator Erica Harris, she deserves a shout out. She raised $11,000 this quarter, which is great for a newly elected state senator, especially considering that she won't even be on the ballot until 2026. She got a 4-year term. So that's a solid start for a freshman for sure.
Yeah, that's a district. I mean, it was a surprise to some that we pulled that one off on the Republican side, and we definitely need to hold it. And we can get more gains in that region. There are more seats we can pick up. So someone like an Erica Harris raising money to then be able to support other candidates to get them across the finish line is big for us. There's some pickup opportunities in that region for sure.
100%.
John, what'd you see?
Yeah, so I saw a little bit of what you were talking about earlier in regards to, Democrats struggling with fundraising for a bit. For example, Dave Vella, who's in a competitive House seat, only raised 24,000. Suzanne Ness, who's also in a competitive House seat, only raised 11,000 with 47,000 cash on hand. I mean, these, competitive House Dems are just know that when the time comes, Welch and Pritzker are going to have all the money they need. But for me, the largest takeaway I saw was kind of our Republican congressional candidates putting up some pretty weak fundraising numbers, if we're just being honest about it. I mean, Ray Estrada, who's running in the 17th congressional district, only raised about $68,000, and a large chunk of that came from himself. So, over 50% of it was a loan to himself. So, he put up a pretty weak fundraising quarter. The same thing with Kent Mercado.
Yeah, I mean, you got to bring up Mercado because he did even worse.
Yeah, I mean, Kent Mercado raised 20 grand and 10,000 of it was from himself, and he's hired the DC consultants and those fundraisers. And it's like, you look at the numbers, the 11th could be competitive with the right candidate and the good message. And I mean, 20 grand in your first quarter just isn't going to cut it when, like we said, Bill Foster has, over $1 million cash on hand. I mean,
yeah.
It's the same thing in the 14th. Jim Martyr only raised about $8,000. I mean, running in these Biden plus 10-ish districts requires about $2.5 million raised. That's what the members of Congress who win these districts raised last cycle. And you have to put up big quarter after quarter if you want to have the funds needed, to get over the finish line come next November.
Yeah, I mean, I know Martyr's got a fundraiser plan. Isn't it up by you, DeRay, in like Lake Zurich or something, which is way outside the district? I mean, money's money. If you can raise it, good. But we're looking at these fundraising numbers from these candidates who've announced so far on the Republican side, and they're not great. And as you said, let's talk about some of these Democrats who've been stockpiling their war chests. You mentioned some of them already, so people can go backwards in time to kind of catch up to what you just mentioned on some of these numbers and others. But I'm just looking at this list. I mean, federally, from Caston, I mean, he's got great numbers. Bill Foster just has a 1.1 million on hand. Budzinski has 720K on hand. Underwood has $1 million on hand. Sorensen has about $750,000 on hand. I mean, they're putting up the numbers you need to hold on to those seats. And Republicans on the other side just aren't. I mean, I get it. It's hard to raise money this early. It's hard to raise money as a Republican. It's hard to raise money for Congress. We weren't asking for more than, let's say, 100K in this, or 150, something to show you're real. But 60, which really is 30, or 20, which is really 10 when you take out your personal loan, it just isn't going to cut it. So we've got to get our act together if we're going to make any of these districts in play. And I'm just not seeing it. Anyone else have a quick thought on that to open up to the larger group?
Just one follow-up on it. And, like what the NRCC is looking at right now is how much money you're raising. I mean, that's kind of their metric for how you are as a candidate. And if you want NRCC to come in with money at the end of your race, you got to show them you're serious. And the only metric they care about this early is money. And nobody's really the NRCC want to care right now.
Yeah, that's a fair point. One person who continues to just ridiculously raise money more than anybody else, and he's always been a great fundraiser, is Raja Krishnamoorthy, who has been a stellar fundraiser for forever, but these numbers are just astronomical. I mean, in one quarter, he raised $1.4 million. He's got $13.5 million on hand. The 8th district's just not in play, especially not with him in it, but he's just always been an incredible fundraiser. But the unique thing has always been, he's been this good of a fundraiser for a long time, 4, 6, 8 years. And every time there's a statewide seat, Raja tries to put his name in and no one takes him seriously. So I'm just curious. People are saying he's angling for a Senate seat, and I'm sure he is. The question really is, even with that massive of a war chest, at what point do Democrats take Raja seriously and throw a bone to the Indian American coalition that he's built and actually let him run for a statewide office?
Well, I think that's
probably when Dick Durbin retires, that's probably his opportunity.
But I mean, when Dick Durbin retires, I mean, he was there's been several people have been rumored that he was trying to bring along to be his replacement, none of which, I mean, it was either going to be a black candidate or there was a white rural candidate that he was trying to, can't think of the word right now, but trying to bring along, trying to mentor for a bit. I've never seen that sort of olive branch go out to Raja, and I've never understood why. Now, I'm not on the Democratic side. Maybe Chris can fill us in, but he's always been a rock star fundraiser, and yet he's never even on the short list for a lot of these seats when they open up.
And he has a lot of bipartisan appeal. I know with last cycle, we had a relatively strong candidate in the grand scheme of things in that race. And people are like, yeah, I kind of like Raja. You know, nothing wrong with you, but like, you know, he's been good to me. He's done a lot of stuff for our district, a lot of brought dollars home. I think he'd be a rock star candidate for the Democrats, but
there's a reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just there's only so many constituencies they can focus on. By the time that they give their I'm going to give the political term for it, but their black constituency, the seats and power that they require. Then they got to throw a bone to Latinos and make sure they have seats. And there just isn't enough left to give to the Indian American crew. And let's be honest, we've run Indian American candidates before. They're great at fundraising because a lot of Indian Americans are willing to cut checks to candidates, but those same people it tends to be a struggle to get them to vote. So maybe that's part of the equation here, that getting Asian voters to the polls is a struggle. So maybe that's why the Democratic Party doesn't do much with Asian voters and Asian politicians and Asian donors. But to me, that screams that Republicans should take advantage of it. I mean, I know Tommy Choi, one of the main staffers over at the Illinois Republican Party, that's his big thing that he pushes for, is, well, one of many, but he pushes for the Republican Party to focus more on Asian Americans and get more involved with the Asian community. I know Julie Cho and a few others have done great raising money and building up some power right of center with the Asian community, but the party itself doesn't seem to focus much on the Asian community. Maybe this is our wake-up call to say, you know what, if the Democratic Party isn't going to take Raja and Indian Americans seriously, maybe we should.
Yeah, and I think, you know, maybe for Raja, his plan is that if I'm not going to be taken seriously, I'm just going to raise so much money that, you know, you're going to have to take me seriously as a candidate. I mean, if a Senate race opens up and you're starting the race with $14 million, I mean, that's going to put you in a really strong position, you know, out of the gate, where if someone like a statewide elected official gets in, I mean, none of their statewide money is really useful because it's at the state level. So, I mean, even if party insiders aren't taking him seriously, he's going to be a serious threat, you know. But another thing to note is that Cranes put out an article last cycle that, you know, members of the Democratic Party aren't too happy with Raja and him sitting on all this money, and he's not known to give it out to other candidates. You know, people want him to share his millions of dollars to help get more Democrats elected, and he's been pretty reluctant to do that.
Well, listen, it's an adage as old as time. When somebody sees you have money, they expect you're supposed to give them some of it. So I'm not surprised to see that, you know, they go to Raja and say, give us some of your cash. And honestly, on Raja's side, I don't blame him for not doing it. I mean, it's been time and time again. I've been doing politics in Illinois now for almost 2 decades. And for ever since Raja's been on the scene, his party has not taken him seriously. So why the heck should he give them his money? So I kind of get both sides of that. The other congressional candidate that stood out to me that others have written about and we should talk about, and we covered this a little bit last week, but Danny Davis had an abysmal fundraising quarter, and he's got 2 serious challengers. If you don't know a lot about that race, queue up last week's smoke-filled room. We talk about it in depth, so we're not going to do it again, but only raising $68K in that race and only having $143,000 on hand. That's a problem for sure. So anyone have thoughts on that, knowing that he's facing 2 very tough candidates and primary challengers?
I think there's a lot of complacency there, and I think we see that with Republicans in safe districts as well. It's not just Democrats like Danny Davis that have issues, you know, have those issues. When you're in office for a long time and you're in a safe district, I think you feel like, what's the point? I'm just going to get elected, as you said last week. I'm going to get elected no matter how much money I raise. So, you know, and maybe he doesn't necessarily take these challengers seriously. So, well, I mean, maybe it'll change, but you know, I think at some point you just get complacent.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Chris would have a lot to say about it. Maybe he'll want to jump in next week to talk about it. Poor guy's not with us. But one more thing to close this out. We talked a little bit about how Republicans always use money as an excuse, and I get it. We are always outspent. I look through the history of the races that our company Core Strategies has run against Democrats, and I think maybe once have we ever had more money than our opposition. So I get it. You just got to be better because you got to overcome that advantage or disadvantage. And here's what we've seen in the data. Having a fundraising disadvantage is 3 points off the bat that you lose in that race. So 3 points can swing any district, or at least a lot of these districts that we're talking about. So it's a disadvantage, but there are key races. We talked about DuPage County. Just while we were here talking, I pulled up Nabila Saeed's report from Q2 there in Matt's region in the 51st district. She raised a total of 17.5. 10 of that was from one check from a union. So she really only raised 7,500 in that district. So, I mean, that's going to be one of the top races legislatively in the whole state. And that's all that she could cobble together to raise. I mean, again, I know the unions will come in with big bucks. Pritzker will come in with big bucks. I get it. But these candidates on the Democratic side, other than maybe some key congressional candidates at the state level, these candidates are not raising big money. They are overly reliant on unions and on Pritzker. If you can somehow start to break their hold on unions, and if Pritzker, if he could be distracted on something else, maybe a presidential run down the road or something, I don't know. You open up all sorts of opportunities here. These stop complaining about the money disparity because it's not as bad as it seems.
I mean, we didn't talk much about like the state level stuff. We focused more on the congressional, but what I was noticing as I looked through a lot of the reports was that, you know, Democrats were they're moving a lot of money around. It's kind of moving it from this bank account to that bank account. It's a lot of transfers in. Sometimes, you know, it's transfers from one committee to the next. So it's kind of a shell game a little bit that it gives off an illusion that all of this money's being raised. But like you said, when you really go down and look into the fine details, a lot of that is not really donations from real people.
Yeah, I mean, again, to illustrate the point, I don't want to be taken, like, I don't want this to be taken wrong. I was going to be honest. Like, yes, the Democrats have a lot more money. Our buddy Patrick Finkston, who will be on next week when we do our in-person event, which will be great. So if you want to join us, I mentioned this last week, let us know. But he reported, I think it was a couple days ago, maybe it was a day ago, I don't know at this point, that House and Senate Republicans versus House and Senate Democrats, it's not even close. House Democrats have 2.3 million on hand. House Republicans have just over 500,000 on hand. Senate Democrats have over 8 million on hand. Senate Republicans have 650K on hand. So don't get me wrong, there is a massive cash disparity. So I'm not going to say that that's not the case. I'm just saying that there are individual cases here where you see signs of light that we could turn this around. So to my party, stop complaining about it and go out and raise some friggin' money. All right, let's move on to the next topic. We've got a lot more to cover. So let's do some Illinois campaign updates. These can be some quick hits if people want, because there's not a ton of new stuff here, but there are some things I want to catch people up on. Michael, I know you've heard from some people. I don't know if it's reliable or not. You can catch us up on it, but you've heard from some people that are talking that they say that Bailey has been told he's not even going to get the Trump endorsement at all in this race. What are you hearing? What are you comfortable sharing on that as my boy Dustin makes a cameo in the background there? What's up, buddy?
I was in West Palm Beach over the weekend, and I heard a rumor that has already been expressed to the Bailey campaign that Trump's endorsement is not, he's not eligible or going to receive that. So I'm going to do a little more digging around, see what else I can figure out. But that was just kind of one of the rumors that I heard, and a nice one too.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Well, I mean, the thing is with Trump, he can wake up any morning and decide, Kofif, I'm just going to do whatever I want today. So you just never know. But it is interesting that that is making the rounds right now.
That's true. I mean, 3 cycles in a row, President Trump has endorsed Congressman Bost, and Mike's been aligned with him and been supportive through thick and thin. So that goes a long way.
All right, next quick hit. Next topic here. Abby, I know you've heard from a few people at this point that Jeanne Ives is starting to float her name for IL6. It's early, so we're not saying she's out there running, but we are hearing her name, and it seems to be coming from her a little bit. So it's something we're talking about.
Yeah, so like similar to what Butler's saying, it's a lot of rumors, but honestly, this is refreshing in a lot of ways because the rumor mill about candidates in DuPage has been dead. It just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of activity. So it's nice to start hearing things like this, that people are starting to think about running for office. But, I heard that she was, talking to precinct committee men at meetings and maybe suggesting she would be thinking about running for the 6th congressional district. But as we all know, she's the 3rd congressional state central committee person. So I don't know. it's hard to say what she's going to do, but it seems like people are finally starting to look at the 6th congressional district. So, well, more to come on that for sure.
Yeah. Apparently your computer screen or your camera didn't like what you were talking about because it kept blacking you out there. But
Yeah, it's like the sun's going behind the clouds, whatever
so
that means.
here's
I
the
don't
thing.
know.
I like your perspective on this, which is at least the rumor mill is starting, which means candidates are finally starting to emerge or at least talk about it. Honestly, if I had to guess, I don't know that Jeanne would do it. I mean, she's just got on radio. I'm sure she's enjoying that gig. She's out there recruiting for other seats. So I don't know. I don't know if I believe it necessarily. But it's not a dumb play from her to put her name out there, at least just to keep her name, fresh in people's minds. But the 6th, I mean, people are frustrated that we're not hearing names in the 6th.
Yep.
And if Jeanne's floating her name, that probably means her and Keith Peacock are fairly close. So if Jeanne's floating her name, that means maybe Keith isn't thinking about it. We don't really have any inside information on that, even though Keith is a friend and has been a client. But you know what? 6th as a district, we need somebody in. And I know a lot of people have been racking their brains on who is it going to be.
Absolutely. And we've been talking about for folks who haven't been listening in weeks past, we've been talking about stuff in Jonathan's region and Butler's region and DeRay's region, really everywhere else. People are looking at running for office, candidates are coming out of the woodwork. And this is really the first even like sniff of anything that's really happened in DuPage. So hopefully that picks up and hopefully we start getting good candidates, especially in the 6th district. It's been a challenge and hopefully we can find a good candidate to run against Sean Casten.
Yeah. All right. Another quick hit. Let's talk about IL11. There are lots of rumors of candidates looking at the 11th congressional district, especially with the one announced candidate not having a great fundraising quarter and not really lighting the world on fire so far. It's funny. We heard there's one name that we've heard from 3 or 4 different people that has been out telling people that they're running. That person then called me and talked about the race and then swore me to secrecy. And so my word is my bond. I now can't say the name, even though we heard about it from people well before this person called me. So it's kind of annoying because I would be talking about it if they hadn't called me and then said, please don't tell anybody that I'm thinking about this. So like, okay, well now what do I do? So all we can do is say generically that there are, I know at least 2 people that are very seriously looking at the race that I think both are going to be getting into this thing. In addition to the candidate that's already announced, I think there's a few others that I've also heard are looking at it. So I think the 11th in the coming weeks and months is probably going to heat up. Unfortunately, we can't give more detail than that, but I'm sure in the next couple of weeks we can. Anyone else have any thoughts? I know John 11th is in your district. Any more thoughts of the things that you've heard, or is that the best we can do right now in terms of what we can share?
There might be a lot of candidates rumored for office and looking to run, but I still think we need to keep looking for someone who can, fit the district and put up the fundraising numbers you need and, maybe be a fresh face for the party in this district.
All right, we'll see what happens. None of that is, I mean, we have not been hired by someone to say anything here. Core strategies itself, I'm sure will play in the 11th. So when we do get hired, we will always say that when we talk about these races, just to make sure we're always being honest and forthright with our positions and where we stand on things. We're pretty objective. So, I mean, we've said things positively about competitors and negatively about our own people. So you can always expect we'll be objective, and we'll keep you posted on the 11th. I want to talk about here, I want to flip the order just a little bit. Matt, I want to go to you briefly. I know we've heard of 2 candidates on the Democratic side who have finally started to emerge with some names for state's attorney in Cook County. I know Chris has heard some rumors about some Republicans running, but there was another candidate who announced on the Democratic side. So it seems like it's finally starting to heat up for state's attorney in Cook County, and that's going to be a high profile race on the Democratic side. So Matt, what are you hearing there?
Yeah, I'm sure this won't be the last of candidates that we hear, but the first bigger name jumped in the race this week. Eileen O'Neill Burke, who Collin, you gotta love because it's 2 Irish names right there.
It's not a dumb play in Cook County.
Yes, she was on the appellate court in District 1. She actually retired from the bench just to run for this seat. She plans on announcing later this month, and she's going to do her kickoff with the Plumbers Union, which is a good play, especially if you're going to be running in Cook County. The other candidate is Clayton Harris III. I didn't know there were other Clayton Harrises, a first and a second, but he's an attorney and he lectures at different colleges, and neither of them have raised any money. They just filed. It wouldn't be smart for them to start filing before the end of the last quarter. It'll be interesting to see how much money they bring in. But the interesting thing is that Clayton Harris III, he does have the support of Tony Preckwinkle, so we'll see how much weight that holds in this upcoming cycle.
Yeah, I mean, if Chris was here, I'm sure he'd have a lot to share on this. So maybe we'll just keep it at this, and next week we'll retouch on this race. But I will say this, Matt, you're trying to suck up to Chris. You saying nice things about a candidate courting unions. I mean, I feel like Chris is, as soon as he hears that, it's going to be texting you that he loves you again.
I felt bad that we all had to picture Chris wearing pink for the Barbie movie, so figured I'd give him some love.
All right, let's talk about House District 97. That's in Oliver's region. And Oliver, I don't want to get you in trouble here. We've got a great candidate in 97, and that district for Republicans is one of the best pickup opportunities on paper. The incumbent is Harry Benton. He's a moderate Democrat, one of the few, and he will make it harder to win than it seems on paper. But on paper, this district's only a few points out of potentially being in play. So this is going to be a high-profile race for Republicans. And I'm only bringing this one thing up. It's not a huge error on Gabby Shanahan's side. As a matter of fact, it's barely even an error, but it's a learning opportunity for all of us, which is why I want to talk about it, because that's part of the goal of this SFR is for all of us and our listeners to learn and get better at politics. So Gabby Shanahan is a great candidate on paper, and I got high hopes for her. And she's put together a pretty good team. By the way, we're not on it, so we have no horse in this race. And I think she's awesome. I've got high hopes for her. One of the challenges that she has is that one of her roles is that she serves as the executive assistant, I think is her title, for the president or CEO or whatever it might be of the Illinois Policy Institute. Chris Welch and a lot of the Democrats hate IPI. Hate IPI. And IPI has been on the forefront of some tougher issues that might not play well in a general election. And so what do you do if you're Shanahan and her campaign team in terms of writing your bio? And so if you read, we'll pull up on screen the way she wrote her bio in this section where she says that she worked for a nonprofit. Here's the challenge. When you have something like that could be a negative in a general election, it's always very hard to message something like that. And if you message it that far away from the facts, all you do is you invite the other side to dig into it. We had a candidate last cycle who was precluded from saying what he did for a living. His contract with that company said he couldn't. And so it was a struggle saying, what do we say? Because if you say too little, you invite people to go, interesting. Why are they being so coy about what they do? And they're going to dig into it even more. Whereas if you say enough, where you say, hey, this is a hint at what I do, but that's the best I can do, people will move on. And I think in this situation, when you just say, I worked for a nonprofit, or that's where I make my money is for a nonprofit, you're begging people to dig in to find out who that nonprofit is. They're going to find it's IPI. They're going to realize you're afraid to talk about IPI, and they're going to come after you hard. Instead, what she could have done is said that I work for a policy organization that fights for X, Y, and Z. And IPI is one of the organizations that does fight for criminal justice reform. There are some middle of the road issues that IPI does fight for. And you could have inserted that as a way to try to message this issue better, so that when someone comes after you, you've got that in there, that it's criminal justice reform, it's lower taxes, it's, pick the issues the way you want it to be framed and put it in there. But by being so overly careful and cautious about it, you've now allowed the other side to control the narrative on that issue. And again, it's a small thing. It's a minor thing. This won't kill or win Shanahan the race, but it's a learning opportunity because we face this for some of our clients, and you want to make sure you control the narrative and you control how you're presented as a candidate. And by being so coy about your day job and how you make money, you've given the other side an opportunity now to come after you for that organization. And so it's just something I noticed that was, again, just a learning opportunity for all of us on the way that you present your message. Take advantage of your chance to contrast yourself with your opposition. If you work for IPI, guess what? You work for IPI. You are going to be hit by that, by the Democrats in the next election, no matter what you say. So stop bracing for the attack. Our Republican candidates are always so afraid of getting attacked that we're afraid of what we might say. We brace for the hit. Instead, understand that you're going to get hit for it. Personal PAC is going to come after you and say that you want to put women behind bars for even thinking the word abortion. The Democrats are going to say you want to bring Uzis into schools because you happen to be a Republican. They're going to attack you for these things. Stop being so afraid to push back, especially when you're lining up your contrast with this. And I just see it so much with Republicans that we're always bracing for the hit instead of planning our punch back. So that's my little mini rant on that. Abby, I want to throw it to you. I know you're friendly with Gabby, so I think I was fair there. I wasn't attacking her, but I think it's something worth talking about so we can continue to improve as a party.
Yes. Excuse me. Something that I was thinking the entire time you were having your little mini rant was, where does that caution come from? And you know, and you pointed out it's like we're bracing for the negatives to come. But I think also when you're in this political space and you're an operative or however you want to call it, I think there's that fear of like, how do you message that to voters if you ever want to run for office? Because people don't want to they want to be perceived as, you know, I'm involved in the community. I've done a lot of things as a mom, as, you know, as an advocate for other things. But, you know, when this world has become so polarized and political, people just tend to focus in on those things. So you understand the caution in some regards. So I think that's where it comes from. And like I said, she's, you know, she's a good friend, and, you know, I wish her the best. So
here's what I'd say, and Michael, get ready to get excited, and Chris too, for listening, because I'm going to say something nice about Donald Trump. But if there's something that anybody could learn from Donald Trump, it's this: that politics has changed. The era, and I get it, a lot of these people running these races comes from the era, which was a little bit before we got involved in politics, that was in my early days, where you can completely control the narrative. You can control what is and isn't said. But that was before social media. That was before the 24/7 news cycle. There's no longer a way to control the narrative as much as you could. And so I understand there was a time where you could so tightly control this that you could keep that from becoming a story. But politics has changed. And at this point, we're at the point where if you sneeze, you're going to get attacked for it. And so start running these races where you just try to avoid any mistake possible. Just spend 18 months avoiding every possible mistake is a losing proposition, because whether you make a mistake or not, you're going to get attacked. They're going to either find things to attack for you that are against you that are truthful, or they're going to make up things to attack against you. They're going to attack you either way. And so if you learn any lesson from Trump, and I'm not saying to go create controversy like Trump has, but you know what? Honestly, something you can learn from it is, guess what? At a certain point, if the Democrats are going to go after you for everything under the sun, it all just becomes white noise to the public. And so let them do that. Let them hit you for this and that and this and that and this, because they're going to do it anyway. Stop being so afraid of getting hit and go out there and run your race and hit back, because guess what? They're going to hit you whether there's something that's accurate to hit you for, or something that they just completely make up. Because we saw in this last round of elections for Republican candidates for the legislature, time and time again, you saw that these candidates who had no ties to pro-life groups, who had no ties to pro-family groups, who had no ties to the NRA or whatever, all the Democrats did was say they would add one line that says their biggest donor is a board member on a pro-life group, or one of their biggest donors gave $1 million to the NRA. So clearly this person loves guns. Like, they're going to find a third degree of separation to hit you for that issue, whether you embrace your base or don't embrace your base. And so stop being so afraid and get out there and fight.
I think, Colin, that's a great point, because, like, you know, I think Republicans need to do a better job of, you know, punching back. I mean, you know, Harry Benton ran for state representative once and lost. You know, there's things to attack him on. You know, Welch is terrible at member control, and he lets his members vote for every bad bill that comes up. So, you know, Harry Benton is going to have things to attack him on, and, you know, just go on the attack. I mean, our poll that we did after 2022 showed that most voters in the state identify as moderate. And when you have even moderate members like Benton taking bad votes on extreme progressive bills, that's not going to play well in a community like Plainfield or in the 97th House District.
Yep.
And also, I think it's a good reminder, like right now, like as things are just starting to kick off and we're entering this primary season, like you have to like take the opportunity to define yourself. And that's, you know, your website, your social media, your walk card, like get out to every event possible, like shake hands, like kiss babies. You know, you got to do all that stuff now. That way, when people see that negative stuff later, like whether it's based in reality or not, like they're going to say, oh, I met that candidate. I saw their Facebook posts. Like I read their so they gave me a walk card. Like I know them, and these things are not accurate.
Yeah. All right. So there's a natural transition here to our next topic, but I'm going to skip our next topic because it gives Lane something, our producer, something to promote for next week. Or maybe it's 2 weeks from now because we've got in person next week. But I want to talk about, because it was Shanahan's response to the Safety Act, and a whole bunch of other candidates in there. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was Shanahan's response and her announcement when she running for office, and a few other candidates brought up corruption. And I know that some of us have strong feelings on, is corruption going to be a good issue for Republicans in 24 or is it not? But I also know Chris has thoughts on this, and I know we're nearing an hour, and there's a couple other topics that I really want to get to. So we're going to hit that topic in a future week because it's a really good topic. But I know with the thoughts that each of us have, that's going to go for a good 10 or 15 minutes. Instead, I want to stick on this, which is fighting back, because there's something that happened in the last week that I heard nothing about from the Republican Party in Illinois, and it drove me crazy because in Chicago, so Netroots Nation had a conference in Chicago this last weekend, and that's a far left progressive group. They had a conference, and at that conference, they had a number of speakers. One of it was a member of the squad, and I'm really bad at names. I think it's Pramila Jayapal. I'm probably close, and I'm probably not on it correctly exactly, so please forgive me. But she's from Washington, a member of Congress, and she called Israel a racist state in a speech at the Netroots conference. And national Republicans jumped on it. They just passed a resolution a couple days ago reinforcing their support for Israel. They started hitting Democrats left and right, saying, do you stand with the representative in calling Israel a racist state? I mean, this was a great opportunity. They forced Democrats to backpedal, and over 40 Democrats had to come up publicly to say that they disagree with this position. And even the representative had to backpedal, even though I don't know how you backpedal on that. She literally said it in a speech. Like, there's no backpedaling that. She said what she said. I mean, this was a big opportunity, and Republicans nationally played off it to good results. I didn't see anything in Illinois. And there are two ways that this could have been used, actually three ways this could have been used by Republicans very, very effectively. The first way is just in fundraising. People give based on emotions, especially small dollar donors. This should have made it into a tweet, a social media post, and an email immediately from the Republican Party saying, Democrats, extreme Democrats were in Chicago this weekend calling Israel a racist state. Do you agree? If you don't, give $10 to the Republican Party or whatever it might be. And so from a fundraising perspective, this should have been something the Republican Party jumped on immediately. Second, from a PR perspective, Republicans should have been jumping on this and asking every single Democrat they could think of, especially Democrats that represent Jewish communities in the state, like North Shore, like up in Matt DeRay's region. Every Democrat should have been asked, do you agree with this representative that Israel is a racist state? Because they're going to have to answer that. And either they have to answer it on the Israel side, which means that they take off their progressive base, or they have to waffle, which means they're going to anger their Jewish donors. I mean, it was a great opportunity to drive a wedge for these representatives in these districts. Do you stand with Israel or do you not? The final thing that could have been used is, because this was in Chicago, a number of Democrats from Illinois spoke and attended at this conference. As a matter of fact, Lane's going to bring something up on screen. The Democrats had a booth. The Illinois Democratic Party had a booth at Netroots Nation. And so we could have said, used that as an opportunity to say, does Brandon Johnson stand with this extreme progressive agenda? Does, I know Schakowsky was there. I'm sure her answer is yes, but make her say it. A number of members of Congress from Illinois were there. Recruiting interns, recruiting volunteers, speaking. This was a great opportunity to drive a wedge and say, do you stand with this representative on this extreme agenda? And a great chance to paint Democrats in the state as extreme, which we talk about we need to be doing. And we heard nothing on this. A wasted opportunity. Now, there's still time, but here we are almost a week later by the time that you guys are watching this. It's a wasted opportunity, but we could do it. Just get moving. Do it now. Because this was said in Chicago. Why aren't we talking about it? Any thought from you guys?
Yeah, and I mean, Collin, so
I ranted so long, my cigar stopped burning down.
Well, and you mentioned that, House Republicans took advantage of this and they put a resolution up. De La Ramirez, a member of Congress from Illinois, voted no on the resolution, and we didn't hear anything about it. I mean, obviously, she has a pretty blue seat, but still, we as a party have an opportunity to go after a member of Congress who voted no on a resolution, supporting Israel. And we haven't heard anything about it. We can use that to raise money in her district, down ballot races in her district, and we're just letting her get away with it.
I mean, listen, Republicans have made gains with white constituencies under Donald Trump. Typically, it's high school educated white constituencies, but there's a white constituency we don't do very well with, and we never have, and that's Jewish voters. They vote roughly 65% Democrat, sometimes more. This was a chance to make some inroads. And if you ever want to win the 10th Congressional up in Matt's area, or some of those legislative seats, you ever want to win some of these seats, you got to make inroads into some of these Jewish communities. And this was a great opportunity to do it, and nothing. I mean, Matt, it's your area that has a lot of these heavily Jewish pockets. Have you heard anything about this?
No, no one has really said anything, and I think it shows a lack of infrastructure and a lack of a plan. I mean, you don't need to know exactly what you're going to say in response to things like this because they didn't know it was going to come up, but at least having the mindset of, okay, we need to be ready for whatever the Democrats are going to say. We need to have a response. We need to know people who know how to respond to this. And there's just been nothing. And I think that this is a symptom of the problem, not necessarily the problem, because this happens often. The Democrats mess up all the time. We just don't know how to call them on it.
Yep. Punch. Stop being so afraid of getting hit and start punching back. All right, we're running low on time. Couple final things here. Looking at the list, seeing which ones we should hit now and which ones we can push to another week. Just a quick question for everybody, because I know we've covered the Illinois Republican Party. There have been challenges at the party for the whole endorsement issue. And there were a few people who complained. I heard from a few people that the party was hosting a fundraiser with Mike Pence when he was in Chicago. It was a private event just for finance committee members of the party. I look at it as, hey, great opportunity to reward your donors and bring a presidential candidate into town. So I didn't think much of it, but I have heard some people have complained about it. Someone brought up to me that, it's yet another sign of the party making endorsements. Curious if you guys are hearing anything about that, or if you have any thoughts on the topic.
Are they just mad that they think the party's taking sides, or is it something else? Because to me, like, I know Lake County's doing this, but they're bringing in high-profile speakers to come to Illinois and raise dollars for local parties and state parties, and I don't really see how that's a bad thing. Illinois is not on the top of everyone's list for states where you can pick up ground. So I think anytime you're allowed to get these bigger ticket speakers, I know Ted Cruz was in DuPage County this week as well. Like, I don't really see that as a bad thing. Like, elevate your brand, make it a state that people want to come to. So I think people make it about endorsements are just the same people that are just trying to cause infighting that doesn't need to exist in our party.
I think it gives us a little bit of credibility. I mean, we had Ted Cruz here, we had Kevin McCarthy here recently. Over in Lake County, like Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be here in a week, or I think next week or in a couple of days. Mike Pence has been here. I mean, you go down the list, like, that's a big deal for us. We're not used to getting those big names, and just because they come to town doesn't mean that, and you go, doesn't mean you support the person. But I mean, they're high profile people, they're running for president. Like, you should at least hear them out.
Yeah.
What's the goal of a political party if it's not going to connect its candidates with its donors and its voter base? I mean, to me, they should be doing that with every Republican candidate, and people should be lining up to meet those people, not shooing them away.
Yeah, that's a good point. By the way, Matt, you want to take advantage of that chance that Butler just gave you to talk about your boy Vivek?
Hey, everyone said Vivek didn't have a chance, and every single day he's creeping up a little bit higher. I think you all will be very surprised when he's the next president of the United States.
Hey, Collin,
I went to an event over the weekend, and Vivek, he had a reception, and there were so many people there, and they were giving out drink tickets, and I only got to use one drink ticket because I couldn't make it to the bar because there were so many people there to see him. It was
Collin,
nuts.
wasn't like Ben Carson leading in the polls at one point in 2016?
Rick Perry. I mean, we all know President Rick Perry. I mean, he was blew up the polls for like 15 total days. But I mean, Matt has a junk poll out there that says that Vivek is basically tied with DeSantis. So I mean, some dude in his basement did a poll that said Vivek is tied for second. And now Maddie's all excited.
But this is politics, so if it fits what I want, then that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad.
Hey, Jonathan and I both met another Vivek voter not named Matt DeRay this week, so it's a movement. It's real.
Oh, there you go. All right. All right.
V for victory.
Okay.
I mean, we all learned from you got to do the V the right way, right? From the Winston Churchill movie. You got to make sure you do it the correct way.
Yeah,
that's true. This means that? Up yours, I think. This doesn't.
Up your bum.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts of that movie. All right, two final things. One, we don't have a lot of time on this, and because we're not talking about corruption, it's not a big topic we're going to cover here. But my buddy John Giacaris, who really I want to get on one of these smoke-filled rooms. I think he's brilliant, and I love the stuff he shares. He shared something that nobody really picked up on, which is Madigan's law firm has basically shut down at this point. He had been hearing rumors for a while that the staff that was left at the law firm were going to be splitting off. And he posted this yesterday that their website, Madigan, his website, his law firm's website, is now officially down. So it looks like the Madigan law firm days are over, and Ed Burke's law firm has basically closed its doors. So it seems like the days of these politicians profiting off of the property tax scam that is Illinois maybe is starting to come to a close. So it's an interesting development. When we talk about corruption in a week or two, maybe you'll find out if John can join us and if he has any thoughts on the topic. But interesting to see that really was no coverage on this in the media, that Ed Burke's law firm is folded, Madigan's law firm is folded. To me, it seems like that's news, but it hasn't really gotten much play. Anyone have any quick thoughts on it? If Chris was here, he'd have thoughts. All right, final thing. I want to close on a positive note. Matt, you had a fun little local story about somebody who ran for office, just cared about making a difference in their community. They weren't successful, but it led to another opportunity. To share that story. I want to close on some positivity here.
Yeah, so Mike Clausen, he's in Homer Township, and he ran for Lockport High School District 205. This is back in the April election, and he didn't come out victoriously, but right after the election, local government officials, they saw his fervor and his wanting to get involved, and they offered him a position as a collector. And just now, one of the township officials in the township that the school district that he was running for was in, one of the trustees resigned, and they saw him and they saw that he had some political ambition and said, hey, why don't you step into this? And I think that this is really telling, because when we talk to candidates, they'll say, well, what if I lose? And there's always the chance that you'll lose, but from this story and stories like this, we can see that there are good things that can come out of just running, even if you lose. You get your name out there, it can help your business, you make connections, and people will still be looking to you as a leader, win, lose, or draw. So to any candidates who are on the fence, I think it's a net positive most of the time, if not all the time.
You run a good race, you'll always come out ahead. That's the story. If you run a good campaign, you will always come out ahead, even if you lose. And that's a great story. I love it. And I've got a similar one. You know, Abby and I, my wife Abby and I, everyone always knows what I mean when I say Abby, but watchers here probably think that I'm talking about you, Oliver. So my wife Abby Corbett, she and I are good friends with Leslie and John Munger, and Leslie ran for state representative, was not successful, but she's got a great background, had been a business leader. She ran a really, really strong race in a district that frankly was just unwinnable. And then rest in peace, Judy Bartopinka passed away just a month after Leslie's election had ended. And wouldn't you know it, the Republican governor appoints Leslie Munger as the state controller, and she gets that opportunity. So it doesn't always mean you run for office and you're going to get some other position that just gets handed to you. But there are opportunities, there are doors you can open by running, and we're in that recruitment season right now. Petitions start getting passed in like 6 weeks. So candidates right now are thinking about, do I do this or do I not? And listen, one of my favorite quotes is a John Adams quote, which says, public business, my son, must be done by someone. If honest men refuse, others will not. I mean, someone is going to fill that position. Someone is going to run for that seat. Someone is going to serve in that office. And if good people don't run for it, then someone else will. And so if we're ever going to make a difference in this state, if we're ever going to turn around the state, stop wondering, you know what, do I have a chance to win? Do I not? Should I do this? Should I not? Take that leap, do the right thing. I mean, Bill Clinton's a great example of someone who no one else wanted to run on the Democratic side because no one could beat George Bush Sr. Clinton ran, ended up becoming president. You just don't know what's going to happen in politics in the next year and a half. And so put your name out there, stand for what you believe in, and you never know what might happen. Anybody have any final positive thoughts on that before we close for the week? Because we were extra negative this week, so we'll close on some happiness.
You never know. You may find yourself in Michigan and meeting someone from Illinois and moving here and working for Core Strategies. So it worked out okay for me. So I hope others consider getting involved.
Anybody else? Come on, you, Michael, John, you guys are capable of being positive for 3 seconds. Give it a try.
We just need good candidates. Please run. I don't have a lot of positive things to say this week, you know.
All right, John, you're a failure. Michael, close us out here. Make me proud.
Hey, we've seen Democrats in Lake County and other places win by accident, and heck, you may
In
be
DuPage
next.
County, Abby saw that. DuPage County, there was a seat in Downers that flipped a couple years ago by a candidate who was kind of wacky, but she pulled it off. No one expected it. So, yeah.
You'll at least make friends along the way and enemies, but you know.
All
It's
right,
part of
well,
life.
that was my try at being a little bit positive. We've got milkweeds on the side of the house. So I don't know if you noticed, but we had butterflies flying behind me today. So my wife Abby is a very positive person. She balances me out. So she likes to listen to these SFRs, and maybe she'll be proud that I tried to be positive for a couple minutes. It's worth a try. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Or listening. Thank you to my political team, Matt, Abby, Michael, John. Thank you to Lane Davis, our producer, who works tirelessly behind the scenes to make this happen. I'm Collin Corbett from Core Strategies. Please like and subscribe. Next week's going to be a fun week. It's our monthly in-person version. So we're going to be at a cigar lounge in Schaumburg with a friend of ours, Patrick Finkston, to talk politics. He'll provide a different perspective. Knowing Patrick, I'm sure he and I will disagree on some issues. It'll be heated. It will be fun. So make sure you watch, and possibly, if you can, shoot us a note. We shoot these things on Thursday afternoons, and next week we're going to allow some people to join us in person. So shoot us a note if you want to join us. But thank you very much. Please like and subscribe, and we will catch you next week.